Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we've got two listener-submitted stories. They're both short horror stories. And wow, they're both pretty creepy.
Yeah.
They both deal with technology and relationships, but in ways that'll make you think twice about your online habits and maybe even your current relationship.
Absolutely.
Here's the first story. I was never the type to pay attention to neon-colored ads blinking on my screen at 2 in the morning. I'd usually ignore them, maybe laugh at their ridiculous claims. So, when I first saw one that said, "Hot single ladies in your area," I scoffed and scrolled on. But after a few minutes of mindless browsing, I noticed the ad changed. This time, the text read, "Hot singles, only 2 kilometers away." I paused. Ads often track your location, but it felt weird to see the exact distance spelled out. I shrugged it off, just a marketing ploy. Nothing new. I got caught up reading a thread for a while, then refreshed. That's when I saw it again, but the distance had shrunk. "Hot single, near you. 500 meters. There was a face on the banner. A brunette with unsettlingly pale eyes, the iris so washed out it was nearly white. She stared through the screen with a knowing smile. Something about her expression felt too personal, like she knew I was watching. A quick shiver ran through me, but I chalked it up to late-night nerves. I forced my attention elsewhere, until another refresh brought up a third ad. This time, it covered the top of the page, big and bold. "I'm closer than you think. 100 meters away." My stomach twisted. I peered out my window, scanning the empty sidewalk lit by a single, flickering street lamp. Nobody was there. I tried to reason it out. Ads can be hyper-targeted, sure, but 100 meters? That was practically my doorstep. I told myself to ignore it, but it got worse. Another banner loaded with the same woman, only now her features were off. Her face looked elongated, her grin stretched a little too wide, almost like a predatory snarl. The text underneath read, "We see you. 50 meters." I felt a chill roll through me. We? There were multiple figures in the background now. Other women with the same pale eyes, all leaning forward, as if pressing closer to the screen. I tried to close the page, but it froze. A pulsing ad replaced everything. "We're right here. 10 meters. My heart thudded. 10 meters is practically my front yard. I jumped from my chair and ran to the window, ripping the curtain aside. Again, nothing. Just my silent street. But the atmosphere felt heavier. Like something was watching from just beyond the glow of the lamp. When I stumbled back to my laptop, the ad had changed once more. "At your door. Open up." A sharp clatter made me whirl. My front doorknob jiggled, metal scraping metal. Something was trying to get in. My eyes flicked back to the screen, where a new image had replaced the older ad. It was a photo of my house, taken from the sidewalk outside. My porch light was on, the potted plant to the left of the door. And in the banner, that brunette stood near the front steps, unnaturally tall, face partially obscured by a swirl of static. She looked even more distorted, with her eyes fixed in a soulless stare. I heard a second jolt at the door. Fear roared in my ears like white noise. I checked my phone, no signal. My Wi-Fi icon flickered. Then came the final blow. The ad changed yet again, displaying my exact address beneath a brand new photo of me, bathed in the monitor's glow, taken from outside my window. I could see the silhouette of someone behind the glass, holding a camera or phone, capturing me in that moment of terror. "Hot single ladies at my address. Click now." Before I could do anything, slam the laptop shut, call the police, my entire screen went black. The house lights flickered, then died. I stumbled in darkness, heart racing. A faint glow came through the curtains from the street lamp. I tried to catch my breath, tried to push away the thought that something stood right outside. The doorknob rattled once more, then fell silent. I don't know how long I stood there in the darkness, waiting for the next sound or movement. Eventually, the lights surged back on, and my laptop whirred softly. Its screen remained off, but the little power indicator blinked tauntingly, like it was daring me to open it again. I couldn't move. Couldn't bring myself to check if that horrifying image was still there. Couldn't look out the window to see if anyone, or anything, was lurking. Now, whenever I close my eyes, I see that ad, the warped faces, those eyes too pale, too hungry. They came so close. Maybe they're still out there in the night, waiting for me to click. Waiting for me to give in. If you see them, don't refresh, don't click. Don't even linger on the ad. Because once they know where you are, they're not selling you a date. They're coming to collect. And next time you check your screen, you might find your own face staring back at you from the other side of the glass. And this time, you won't be able to shut the page.
Here goes the second story. I found a box of my things in my boyfriend's closet I didn't give to him. It started with the sweater. A simple navy blue pullover I thought I'd lost months ago. It was folded neatly on the top shelf of my boyfriend's closet, and I only noticed it because I was hunting for a blanket while he was in the shower. I pulled it down, frowning. "Hey, Nick," I called out, holding it up as he came back into the room, toweling his hair. "Isn't this my sweater? I thought I lost it." Nick froze for just a second, then shrugged. "Oh, yeah, you left it here ages ago. I forgot to mention it." It was a reasonable explanation, but something about the way he said it didn't sit right. I didn't remember ever bringing that sweater to his place. That nagging feeling stayed with me over the next few days. It wasn't like Nick to keep secrets. We'd been dating for 2 years, and while we had our ups and downs, I trusted him. But this felt different. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I waited until Nick was out running errands, then went back to his closet. The sweater was still on the shelf, but as I scanned the other items, I noticed something odd. A plain cardboard box tucked in the corner, partially hidden by a stack of old shoes. My name was scrawled on the lid. Heart pounding, I pulled the box out and opened it. Inside was a collection of things that were unmistakably mine. A hairbrush I hadn't seen in over a year. A photo of me from high school that I'd lost when I moved out of my parents' house. A necklace my best friend gave me for my birthday, the one I thought I'd dropped somewhere in the city. My stomach turned. These weren't things I could have accidentally left behind. They were items I hadn't seen in years. Things I thought were gone forever. Then I found the notebook. It was a cheap spiral-bound journal, one I used to carry around for doodling and writing grocery lists. Flipping through the pages, my throat tightened. The handwriting wasn't mine, it was Nick's. Page after page, he'd written down details about me. Things I liked. Things I didn't. Places I went. People I talked to. The final pages were the worst. They weren't about me anymore. They were about us. Things I hadn't even told him. Arguments we never had. Future plans I'd never agreed to. And at the very end, scrawled in a frantic, looping hand, was a single sentence repeated over and over. "She'll understand eventually." I didn't hear Nick come back. By the time I looked up, he was standing in the doorway, staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. "I told you to stay out of my closet," he said, his voice eerily calm. I tried to speak, to explain, but my words caught in my throat. Nick stepped closer, slowly closing the door behind him. "It's okay," he said softly. "Now we can finally talk about what's next." Nick's words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "Now we can finally talk about what's next." What does that mean?" My voice cracked as I spoke. He tilted his head slightly, his eyes locked on mine. "It means you've finally found it." I wasn't sure how long it would take, but here we are. I felt frozen, my mind screaming at me to run, to get away from him, but my body refused to move. "Nick, this isn't normal," I whispered, clutching the box as if it could shield me. This isn't okay." He smiled then, but it wasn't the warm, familiar smile I'd known for 2 years. It was something else, something cold. "You don't see it yet," he said, taking a slow step closer. "But you will. I've been keeping track, making sure everything is perfect. For us. For us? I repeated, my voice rising. Nick, this is insane. You've been stealing my stuff, keeping a journal about me. What is wrong with you? His smile faltered, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. But it was gone in an instant. You're just scared. I get it. Change is hard. But I've been preparing for this for a long time. I backed up until I hit the edge of the bed, the box still clutched to my chest. Preparing for what? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and shiny. A key. He held it up between his fingers. This, he said, is for the place I've been working on. I didn't want to show you until it was ready, but, well, you found the box sooner than I expected. It's not exactly how I planned it, but that's okay. We'll make it work. The place? I echoed, shaking my head. Nick, listen to yourself. I'm not going anywhere with you. His face darkened. You don't mean that. You're upset right now, and that's normal. But once you see it, you'll understand. You'll see why I had to do things this way. I don't want to see anything, I said, forcing myself to stand. I want to leave. Right now. The air between us grew tense, the silence stretching painfully long. Finally, Nick sighed and tucked the key back into his pocket. You're not ready yet, he said, almost to himself. But that's okay. I've waited this long. I can wait a little longer. Before I could respond, he turned and walked out of the room, shutting the door behind him. I heard the sound of a lock clicking into place. Panic surged through me as I dropped the box and ran to the door. I yanked on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Nick, I screamed, pounding on the wood. Let me out. His voice came from the other side, calm and measured. You need time to think. I'll come back when you're ready to listen. Footsteps faded down the hall, and then there was nothing. No sound, no movement. Just the overwhelming silence of the locked room. I spun around, searching for a way out. The window. It was my only option. I rushed over and yanked on it, praying it would open, but it barely budged. He jammed it somehow. My chest tightened as the weight of the situation sank in. I was trapped. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a small camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling, its tiny red light blinking steadily. My stomach churned as I realized he'd been watching me, probably for a long time. The blinking light seemed to mock me, and I felt a wave of anger rise through the fear. I grabbed the closest object, a lamp from his bedside table, and hurled it at the camera. It shattered on impact, and the camera's red light died. For a brief second, I felt a surge of triumph. But the sound of hurried footsteps outside the door yanked me back to reality. He was coming back. The footsteps stopped just outside. I backed up to the far wall, my breathing ragged, clutching a book like it could protect me. Nick, I shouted, forcing my voice to sound stronger than I felt. You're insane. You need help. A low chuckle seeped through the door, sending shivers down my spine. Oh, I'm not the one who needs help, he said softly. You just don't see it yet. But you will. My throat tightened as the door handle jiggled. I don't need the camera, he murmured, almost lovingly. I've been watching you long before that. I know exactly what you'll do next. The handle stopped moving, but I could hear his breathing now. Close. Too close. And then, so softly I almost missed it, he whispered through the crack in the door. You'll never leave me.
In the first story, it all starts with those targeted ads we all see online. But these take a dark turn, to say the least.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they really play on, I think that common fear we have about, how much is out there about us online and, how much do these companies know about us?
right, and what are they doing with that information?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we've all had that experience where we talk about something and then suddenly we're seeing ads for it everywhere.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's like, how did they know?
Yeah.
It's like they're listening.
Yeah, it's really unsettling, and that's exactly the kind of fear that this first story taps into.
It does. And what's really effective is how the story uses something so commonplace, those ads that follow us around the internet, and twists it into something sinister.
Right.
It plays on our very real anxieties about data privacy
Yeah.
and how our online activity is being used.
And it takes it to a whole other level. I mean, in this story, the protagonist starts seeing these really creepy ads featuring a woman with unsettlingly pale eyes and a smile that's like way too wide, you know?
Yeah. That just gets more and more distorted as the story goes on.
Yeah, it's like something out of a nightmare.
It is. It's like the digital world is trying to reach out and grab her.
Exactly. And as the story progresses, the ads start using exact distances.
Oh, yeah. Like how far away?
Yeah.
That's so creepy.
Yeah, it's shrinking with each refresh, like something is closing in on her.
Oh, it's like a countdown almost.
Yeah, and the fact that it's happening through something as mundane as online ads makes it even more terrifying.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, we see these things every day. We don't think anything of it. But this story really makes you think twice.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that the digital and real worlds are becoming increasingly blurred.
They are. There's not such a clear distinction anymore.
And then in this story, it culminates with the protagonist's own address and photo appearing in one of the ads.
Oh, wow. That's just a complete violation.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate invasion of privacy.
Like they know exactly where you are.
Right. And just when you think things can't get any worse, the power goes out.
Oh, no.
The protagonist is plunged into darkness, left wondering if the threat from those targeted ads is truly gone.
Oh, that's such a cliffhanger.
It leaves you with this feeling of unease, like something bad is about to happen.
Yeah, and you don't know if she's safe or not.
Exactly. That feeling of helplessness in the face of unseen forces is something that resonates in the second story as well.
Okay.
In this one, the protagonist finds herself trapped in a seemingly perfect relationship that quickly turns sinister.
That's interesting because it seems like these stories are both dealing with different kinds of threats.
They are, but they both tap into that same primal fear of the unknown and the feeling of being powerless to stop it.
Right.
In the second story, what initially seems like a simple discovery, a lost sweater reappearing in the boyfriend's closet,
Okay.
soon unravels into a tale of manipulation and control.
Yeah.
This story really got under my skin. It's like a slow burn that gradually builds tension until you're completely hooked.
Yeah, I can see that.
The writer masterfully uses subtle details to create a sense of unease.
Okay, like what?
Well, for example, the protagonist finds a box of her belongings that she thought was lost. It's a clear sign that something is amiss, that the boyfriend has been keeping secrets.
Oh, that's creepy. Yeah, and it makes you wonder what else he's hiding.
Exactly. And those secrets are revealed in the most chilling way imaginable through the boyfriend's journal entries.
Oh, wow. So we get to see his perspective.
Yeah, his obsessive tracking of her every move, his detailed notes on her likes and dislikes. It's all so disturbing.
Wow. It's like he's trying to control every aspect of her life.
It's like he's trying to erase her identity and mold her into his ideal image.
That's really scary. And it reminds me of some of the cases I've read about where stalkers use technology to monitor their victims.
Right. It's a very real and terrifying phenomena.
It is. And those journal entries aren't just about observation. They're about control.
Oh, yeah.
He's writing down things she hasn't even told him, future plans she never agreed to, as if he's trying to script her life.
It's like he's trying to rewrite her story.
Exactly. And he even has this chillingly repeated phrase, she'll understand eventually, highlighting his delusional belief that his actions are justified.
That's the part that really sent chills down my spine. Is like he genuinely believes he's doing the right thing.
Yeah, it's like he's completely lost touch with reality.
And that sense of being trapped and controlled is amplified when the protagonist realizes she's locked in a room with a hidden camera watching her every move.
Oh my gosh, the violation of privacy is taken to a whole new level.
It is. It's like he's created his own little prison for her.
And he's watching her every move.
The way the story builds to that moment is so suspenseful. It's like you can feel the walls closing in on her.
Yeah, it's really claustrophobic.
And then that final line, "You'll never leave me."
Oh gosh.
It's just bone chilling.
It leaves you with a sense of dread and a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah. Will she escape, or is she doomed to become another victim of his twisted obsession?
I guess we'll have to wait and see.
I think what makes both of these stories so effective is that they tap into our deepest fears about the world we live in.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not ghosts or monsters that we're afraid of, but the very real possibility of being watched, tracked, and manipulated in ways we may not even be aware of.
That's what makes them so unsettling.
Right. They force us to confront the uncomfortable truth that even in our hyper-connected world, we can still be incredibly isolated and vulnerable.
Absolutely. It's a sobering thought for sure.
Yeah.
But before we get too deep into the existential dread, let's take a step back and consider what we can learn from these stories.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
What stood out to you the most in terms of themes and takeaways?
Well, for me, it's this stark realization that our digital footprint can have very real and potentially dangerous consequences.
Yeah, I agree.
We need to be more mindful of what we share online, the permissions we grant to apps and websites, and the potential consequences of our digital actions.
It's so easy to get caught up in the convenience and connectivity of the digital world that we forget about the risks.
We need to be more discerning, more aware of the trade-offs we're making with our data every day.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to pause here for a moment, but when we come back, we'll delve even deeper into these stories, exploring their themes and takeaways in more detail. We'll also talk about some practical steps you can take to safeguard your privacy and protect yourself from the darker side of the digital world. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Okay, so we just finished talking about these two really creepy stories. One about those targeted ads gone wrong, and the other about the controlling boyfriend.
Yeah, both pretty unsettling.
Definitely. So before we paused, we were talking about how easy it is to forget about the risks of the digital world when you're so caught up in the convenience of it all.
Yeah, it's like we're constantly making these trade-offs with our data without even realizing it.
Right. And I think these stories really highlight the potential consequences of those trade-offs.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like we're living in a panopticon, constantly being watched and judged by algorithms we don't even understand.
That's a pretty heavy image.
It is, but I think it's an apt one. You know, we're surrounded by technology that's collecting data on us all the time. Our phones, our computers, even our smart home devices are tracking our every move.
It's kind of creepy when you think about it.
Yeah, and it's not just about our personal data. Either think about the impact on democracy, on our ability to think critically and make informed decisions.
That's a good point. I mean, when we're constantly bombarded with information that's tailored to our biases, it creates these echo chambers where we only hear what we want to hear.
Exactly, and it becomes really difficult to distinguish truth from fiction, to have meaningful dialogue with people who hold different viewpoints.
So what can we do about it? Is there any way to reclaim our privacy and autonomy in this increasingly digital world?
Well, it's not an easy task, but there are definitely steps we can take.
Okay, like what?
Well, for starters, we need to be more mindful of our digital habits.
Okay.
So like limiting our screen time, being more selective about the information we consume, and diversifying our sources of news and information.
Those are all good things, but it's so hard to break those habits, you know?
It is. It takes effort, but it's worth it for our mental health and our privacy.
I agree.
And, you know, there are also privacy-enhancing tools we can use, like VPNs.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
Encrypted messaging apps, and privacy-focused browsers.
Okay, those all sound good, but I'll be honest, I don't really know that much about them.
Yeah, well, it's definitely worth doing some research and finding the tools that work best for you.
Okay, so that's all about protecting our data. But what about protecting ourselves and our relationships? I mean, that second story really got to me.
Yeah, that one was particularly unsettling.
How can we protect ourselves from that kind of manipulation and control?
Well, first of all, we need to be aware of the red flags.
Okay, what kind of red flags?
Well, controlling behavior is a major one.
Okay.
So is your partner constantly checking up on you, trying to limit your contact with friends and family, or dictating how you should dress or behave?
Yeah, those are all pretty obvious signs.
They are, but sometimes it's more subtle.
Like what?
Like passive-aggressive comments, guilt trips, emotional manipulation.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely experienced that before.
Yeah, it's all about power and control.
Right?
Abusive partners often try to isolate their victims, making them dependent and vulnerable.
And it can happen so gradually that you don't even realize it's happening until it's too late.
That's right. It's a slow erosion of your sense of self.
So what can you do if you find yourself in that situation?
Well, first of all, it's important to remember that you're not alone.
Okay.
There are resources available, people you can talk to, and steps you can take to protect yourself.
Like what?
Well, reaching out to a trusted friend or family member, a therapist, or a domestic violence hotline can be incredibly helpful.
Those are all good suggestions.
And there are also online resources and support groups that can provide guidance and support.
Okay, good to know.
And most importantly, remember that you deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve to be in a relationship that is based on trust, equality, and mutual support.
That's so important. Sometimes we forget that we deserve to be happy.
We do. And it's okay to walk away from a relationship that is toxic or harmful, even if it's difficult.
It's about setting boundaries, respecting ourselves, and recognizing that we deserve to be in healthy, fulfilling relationships.
Right. It's about putting ourselves first.
And I think that message of empowerment is really important, especially in the context of these stories.
Absolutely. These stories may be dark and disturbing, but they also remind us that we have a choice. We have a voice, and we have the power to create a better future for ourselves.
So before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the power of storytelling.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, these stories, while fictional, tap into very real anxieties and fears that we all experience.
They do, and they force us to confront uncomfortable truths and to engage in meaningful conversations.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes them so valuable.
Yeah, they're not just entertainment. They're a way of making sense of the world around us.
And they remind us that we're not alone in our struggles.
Exactly. There's a shared humanity in these stories that connects us all.
So when we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive by exploring the larger message that these stories convey. And we'll discuss some practical steps you can take to safeguard your privacy, protect your relationships, and reclaim your power in a digital world. Stay tuned. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive.
All right.
So we've spent a good amount of time talking about these two really creepy stories. And, I'm ready to kind of move on to a more positive note now.
Yeah, me too.
It's a lot to process,
It is. It can be kind of overwhelming.
So let's shift gears a bit and focus on what we can learn from these stories.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's important.
How can we actually use these experiences to empower ourselves and maybe make some positive changes in our own lives?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the biggest takeaways here is that we need to be more aware of the potential risks of technology.
Right. It's not all fun and games.
Yeah. I mean, it can be a really powerful tool for good, but it can also be used for harm.
Exactly. And these stories really illustrate that point.
They do. And I think they also highlight the importance of setting boundaries in our relationships,
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
both online and offline.
Right. It's about knowing our worth and not letting anyone take advantage of us.
Exactly. And I think it's also about having open and honest communication with the people in our lives.
Yeah, communication is key.
Being able to talk about these issues and share our concerns.
So if we zoom out and look at both stories, what are some of the common threads or overarching themes that emerge?
Well, I think one major theme is the invasion of privacy,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
both physical and psychological.
Right.
I mean, in both stories, the protagonist's sense of safety and security is shattered when they realize they're being watched, tracked, and manipulated without their consent.
And it's happening in such subtle ways, too.
Yeah, it's not always overt or aggressive,
Right. It can be really insidious.
like those targeted ads that seem harmless at first.
Yeah, but they're actually collecting data on us and using it to manipulate our behavior.
Exactly. And then in the second story, we see how technology can be used to control and abuse someone in a relationship.
That one was really disturbing.
It was, and it really highlights the importance of being aware of the warning signs of an unhealthy relationship.
Right. It's not always easy to spot those red flags, especially when you're in the thick of it.
That's true, and that's why it's so important to have a strong support system.
Yeah, people you can trust to talk to and confide in. So, given all of this, how can we protect ourselves? What are some practical things people can do to safeguard their privacy and their well-being?
Well, I think it starts with being more mindful of our digital footprint.
Okay.
Paying attention to the information we share online and being careful about the permissions we grant to apps and websites.
And it's also about being aware of the people we're connecting with online.
Yeah, definitely.
Doing our due diligence and not being afraid to trust our gut instinct.
Right. If something feels off, it probably is.
So much of this comes down to intuition.
Yeah, I think so too.
Being in tune with our inner voice and not being afraid to speak up if something doesn't feel right.
Absolutely.
These stories are definitely a wake-up call.
Yeah, they are.
But they're also a reminder that we have the power to create a better future for ourselves.
We do. We just need to be proactive and informed.
And we need to support each other.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, this has been a really interesting conversation, even though it's been a bit dark at times.
It has, yeah.
I think it's important to have these kinds of conversations, though.
Definitely.
To bring these issues to light and start a dialogue.
I agree. I think these stories serve as a reminder that we need to be more vigilant, more aware, and more proactive in protecting ourselves and our loved ones.
And to remember that we're not alone in this.
Right. There are resources available and people who care.
Okay, well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap things up.
Yes, sounds good.
So thanks to everyone for listening to another deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
And we'll see you next time.
All right, take care.